Alrighty, so for example 2, again, we're working with the inequality. So the first thing that we want to do is have our 0 on the right-hand side. So we need to move this positive x and this positive 3 by reversing that. So since this x is positive, I'm going to subtract on both sides, and we need to combine like terms, and I'm going to subtract this 3 on both sides, okay? So now we have x squared plus 2x minus 8 is less than or equal to 0, okay? Once we have that 0 on the other side, we are then able to take our box and label it as our function. So this is going to be our f of x. Our f of x here says less than or equal to 0, so that is going to be negative. So essentially, if we're doing our way 1, we're going to look below the x-axis, and if we're doing way 2, we need to take all the positive intervals, okay? So, perfect. Once you've established whether it's negative or positive, you are able to get rid of your inequality sign and just write an equal sign. And we solve regularly. Again, our a is 1, so when a is 1, we can regularly factor. So we put our x here, and we put our 0, and we want to know what adds to give us positive 2, because we always take the sign, and what multiplies to give us negative 8. And if we don't know, we make a multiplication chart with the multiplication number, and we always take the sign. So we have 1 times 8, 2 times 4, 3 doesn't work, and then we're back at 4. So this would be everything. We have to multiply to get a negative, which means one of these has to be negative. We look at the sign of this middle one, and that is going to be for the bigger one. So here our biggest one is going to be positive, which means our smallest ones are going to be negative. Then we need to figure out which one is going to add to give us positive 2, and that's going to be this bottom set. So we have negative 2 and plus 4, okay? So now we need to go about solving this. We look on the inside and see what x would have to be to give us 0. So here x would have to be positive 2, and here x would have to be negative 4, okay? And if you want, remember, if a times b is equal to 0, then you set a equal to 0 and you set b equal to 0. So if you want to break those up, you can do that also, okay? So now, again, we have 2 ways to do this. I'll go through the first one first, through the first way first. This is just using our graph. So these are our critical values, and we know that this is where it's going to go through our x-axis. So we have our 2 here, and we have negative 4 here. We need to look at what our graph looks like. Our function is here, so we always go back to the box. Do not go back to the original problem. Whenever we're working with stuff, we need to go back to the box, okay? So when we look at our box, our a is positive 1, which means we're pointing up. So we are going to have a minimum, again, just like example 1, okay? So we only want negative values because our box is less than 0, okay? Which means we are going to take this part of the graph only. So if we were to take that, that is only going to be from negative 4 to 2. And then we need to determine whether we use parentheses or brackets, and we look at our inequality sign. There is an equal sign, which means we're including, so we're going to use brackets because we're stuck in jail. Remember that? So we put our brackets, and this would be the final answer, okay? So now, as far as way 2 goes, you will have to know how to do way 2 because it's not always that simple, like I said, when we're working with the inequalities. With fractions, it's more complicated to be able to determine what the graph looks like. But yeah, we will get there in just a second. So, as far as way 2 is concerned, remember we do not go back to the original problem. We always go back to our box or our function, okay? So, we have our critical values, and we write that on a number line. We have negative 4 and 2. And now we need to pick numbers between each of our intervals, okay? So we have a negative to positive, so the easiest one to pick, again, would be 0. Here we could pick 3, and here we could pick negative 5, okay? So now we need to plug these into the box, okay? Do not plug into the original problem. So we need to plug our values into the box and see what we get. Let's start with 0. We get 0, 0, and negative. So here we get a negative. we plug in our 3, we get a 9, so instantly this is going to give us a positive. And if we do -5, we get 25, -10, -8, but we still come out with a positive, okay? So again, remember, we only want the negative values because our box is less than or equal to 0. So we want from -4 to 2 again. So we have from -4 to 2. And to determine whether it's parentheses or brackets, we look at our inequality sign. There are lines, so we are including that. And this again would be our final answer.